So at this point, a little bit of time has passed since the first Spider-Man game from Insomniac first released back in September of 2018, and even though it hasn't been all that long realistically, it hasn't even been a full 2 years yet, and we're still a little ways off from that point, I still do want to talk about the sequel for when it does release, probably at some point in the fall of next year, and while that still definitely is a ways off, I still want to talk about it either way because I really love the first game. I thought it was fantastic. It was easily one of my favorites of 2018, and I still look back at it as some of the most fun I've had within a game within the last few years. I haven't touched it since the third DLC back when that released in December 2018, but just going off of memory, I can still say that the game is fantastic. Again, it hasn't even been that long, so me talking about it as if it's been at least 5 years is just dumb to me. So, we're just gonna pretend that never happened. But I think that with every sequel, the point of it should not be just to expand on the original, but to improve upon the original in every single way. Because I'm confident that the sequel is gonna be a great game. Insomniac has proven with the first that they know how to do Spider-Man games. They show that they're extremely talented and understand the character, the story, the web swinging mechanics, just all the main parts of the game that made it as beloved as it was. I'm already confident will be great within the second, and probably even better. But it wasn't a perfect game, the first one, and I want to talk about things that could be improved upon for the sequel. So, with that being said, let's just get into it. Hope number one. And this has to do with the little puzzle games that you do as Peter Parker in, Doc Ock's lab, for example. These little types of minigames where you have to match up patterns on an in-game PC in Doc Ock's laboratory, either these parts of the game need to be completely scrapped for the sequel or altered to a point where they're no longer the same types of games, because the fact that you can skip these missions altogether if you fail enough times should really say everything you need to know about them. They aren't fun. They're just repetitive, they're annoying to have to get through, and again, the fact that you can skip them really says everything about just how much Insomniac themselves finds them enjoyable. I get that you want us to have something to do while playing as Peter Parker, but just walking around that homeless shelter that Aunt May runs in the game, even if you aren't doing anything productive, just walking around and looking at what the NPCs are doing is a lot more engaging than having to participate in these missions, and I hope that either for the second game they're gone or completely changed up to something that's actually fun, because the ones that we have in that first game, yeah, I'm not feeling it, so hopefully something is done about them for the sequel. Hope number two, and just like the first hope, this is also something that I'm hoping either gets scrapped entirely for the sequel or is altered into something different, which is most likely going to be the case considering the direction that they're taking Miles into in this universe, but seeing as MJ still exists within this universe too, and is most definitely going to be a character that exists within the sequel, the possibility of these missions returning is there. Albeit it's low, but it is still there. What I'm talking about are the forced, stealthy MJ and Miles missions that, of course being forced, you have to do in order to progress within the story of the game, where the whole point of these missions is that you gotta get from point A to point B with the only option of gameplay being stealth, and if you're spotted at all, which is going to happen many times while you play these missions as you get more and more frustrated while playing them, you're then forced to restart back from the previous checkpoint. You can't find a way to run away from the enemies so that they lose track of you. You aren't allowed to find ways to defend yourself, seeing as you're playing as a normal person. You aren't playing as Spider-Man, so you don't have any power to defend yourself against, automatic assault rifles, which is a very common type of weapon in the game. Instead, no, you just gotta keep trying until you realize, fuck this, I'm bored, I'm just gonna rush through them until I hopefully get to the end of the mission, and that's basically it. But in order to make up for this fact, what the game does is introduce these very revolutionary and never-before-seen game mechanics in any other game, such as throwing a rock in the distance to distract enemies, zapping enemies with a taser to knock them out, and the best one is in one mission where you're playing as MJ, where instead of playing as Spider-Man, you're forced to watch him and tell him where enemies are so he can web them up, all the way up to the ceiling, where upon touching the ceiling after being webbed up to it, they immediately disappear once you look upwards. So I definitely appreciate the effort and why these missions exist, but if anything, they only hurt the pacing of the game more than they do help. But again, I do get it, but For a sequel, I'd rather play as Miles as Spider-Man. Spoilers for those of you that didn't know. If you're watching this video without having played the first game, that's your own fault, but I digress. I'd rather play as Miles as a secondary Spider-Man as opposed to playing as MJ as just a normal, boring human being who has no worth beyond just screaming for help. But, yeah, hopefully those types of missions don't return for the sequel, but that's that with Hope number 2. Hope number 3. And this was my biggest issue in the first game, the side content. It was fun at first for the first few hours, but after a little while of doing it, you came to realize that it was nothing more than just another Ubisoft game that you've played within the last 10 years. It's fun at first, but when you do the same old link up this tower over here, or chase down that pigeon over there for the 30th time, or take down that enemy base for the 100th time so you can finally earn enough tokens to unlock the rest of the suits in the game, or take down that group of enemies over there for the millionth time, it just becomes really shallow, and it just shows how repetitive and tedious the content is in the game. But one set of missions that actually does stick out to me are the Tombstone missions, where you're tracking down the villain Tombstone, and then once you finally catch up with them, you get this cool little boss battle that you do. That isn't required, it's just there if you finally get to the end of that little side story. And that's more of what I wanted to see as opposed to having to get that same pigeon over there again for probably like the 30th or 40th time. I'm definitely hoping for more quality over quantity when it comes to side content for Spider-Man PS4 or Spider-Man PS5. Whatever it's going to be called. Probably Marvel Spider-Man PS2, but, you know, we'll just have to wait and see. Hope number 4, and that is even more suit content. Now, don't get me wrong. I thought it was great in the first game. There was a very good variety of it, a shit ton of suits to choose from. I really like that you could get powers along with each suit, or at least most of them, like the Spider Bro power, where you have this little, like, mechanical spider come down and help you, and the fact that you can mix and match each suit with each different type of suit power was sick as shit to see, but I think that Insomniac can definitely go a little bit further with suit customization, such as being able to maybe mix and match different suits together, so you're wearing classic Spider-Man boots. Maybe your upper half of your body could be covered by the black suit, and then, like, the legs are, like, the 2099 suit. You know, just cool things like that, or better yet, being able to create your own suits. And there's a very good chance that the black suit's gonna be in the second game. There's no doubt about that, considering how the first game ends, so maybe, like, in the suit selection in the game, you can choose, like, different variants of suits. For example, over here it says black suits. And then when you open up the black suit selection, you get the classic black suit. The Raimi Spider-Man black suit. I am hoping it's in the game. Like, Spider-Man 3 may have not been a great film, but I still do love that suit a lot.
This is something else.
And, like, this game's version of the black suit, and then here you got the classic suit, the advanced suit, etc., etc. You get what I mean. And as for the customization side of things, like, maybe take inspiration from Web of Shadows, where, like, maybe you're sticking with, like, the black suit, or one of the many black suits in the game, and by sticking with the symbiote, you get your own pair of upgrades, like, with that suit, while by using the red suit, you get other types of upgrades, and this also affects, like, how you fight, like, just on the ground, or how you fight in the air, or how you're fighting on the walls. Just basically everything that made Web of Shadows great with the suit mechanics, just put all that into this game. Better yet, just call it Web of Shadows 2. Marvel's Web of Shadows. I think that's the perfect name. You know, why not? Basically, allow us to switch back and forth between black suit powers and red suit powers. Again, Marvel's Spider-Man Web of Shadows 2. Waiting for it. And finally, hope number 5. Make the open world feel a bit more alive. Now, don't get me wrong. Insomniac did a great job of making this version of New York feel and look like the actual New York, but obviously a bit smaller in size for the sake of an open world game. But even with how good it looks and feels, and even with how much fun it is to swing through, outside of that, there really isn't as much to the city as I feel there should be. Like, sure, you can high-five civilians, you can, like, take photos with them, which means forcing them into selfies when they're clearly walking elsewhere, or even do the classic Spider-Man 3 finger pose, but aside from that, you really can't do much interaction with civilians. Like, you know how when you're using the fast travel system and going through the subway, and during the loading screens you see Spider-Man talking to civilians? I would love to see more of that, but in just the regular open world, where maybe you're standing around for a good minute, and then a civilian comes up to you and then is like, hey, can I have your autograph? Hey, can I take a photo with you? Hey, like, can we have some small talk for a sec? And, you know, you see Spider-Man and the civilian, like, chatting it up for a sec, and then they both go on their merry way. Just little details like that, or seeing civilians interact with each other a lot more. Kind of like in the way I described with civilians and Spider-Man, but instead of it being a superhero and a civilian interacting, it's just regular people. Now, one thing I will say that they did a great job of was JJ.
They're crap. Crap. Mega crap.
I love how he was basically talking shit in a podcast the entire game. Like, that was great. Just more of that, you know? More little details like that. But yeah, those are my top 5 hopes for the game. Like, even if none of these hopes actually ever happen for the game, I'm still gonna be excited for it, and I'm most likely gonna still love it, probably, because Insomniac, even with the first game's few flaws, really it doesn't have many of them, even with the few flaws that it has, it's still fantastic. It's still an excellent game that anyone and everyone should play. And, even if it does have flaws, you know, the second, I'll probably still have a great time with it, because I'm confident that Insomniac's gonna deliver on something great after just how good the first one was. So, even if the side content or whatever isn't good, I'm sure that the story will be at least. And that's really what matters most in a game like this. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, then make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe for future content coming soon, and I will see you all next time. But until then, I'm out. Later.